On the happiest day of my life, in front of hundreds of guests, he handed me a folder. At first, I thought it was a gift, but when I opened it, I froze. They weren't vows. They weren't promises. They were papers. And with a cold smile, he said, "You have two options, sign or be destroyed." The music stopped. The crowd gasped. My heart shattered. But instead of tears, I smiled. Because in that moment, I realized he had no idea who he was playing with. And what followed is a story no one in that room could have ever imagined.
Today, I'm going to share a story with you that begins with a wedding, but ends with a twist no one could ever predict. A story of betrayal, secrets, and a revenge so chilling, it will keep you on edge until the very last second. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's uncover the truth together, because what she did after opening those papers was something no one in that room was prepared for.
They say a wedding day is the happiest day of a woman's life. But for me, it was the day my world shattered in front of hundreds of people. The chandeliers sparkled above me, the music swelled, and every eye in the grand hall turned to watch me, the bride, walking down the aisle in my flowing white gown. My hands trembled, not because of nerves, but because I felt something was off. There was a heaviness in my chest, a whisper that today was not going to end the way I had dreamed since childhood. When I finally stood before him, the man I thought I loved, the man I thought loved me, he didn't smile. He didn't look at me with warmth. He looked at me with pity. And then, in front of everyone, with cameras flashing and guests whispering, he reached into his jacket pocket. Instead of holding my hands, he handed me an envelope. A white envelope. Heavy. Official. Wrong. I froze. The hall fell into silence. My bridesmaids looked at each other in confusion. My parents gasped. I could hear the faint clink of a champagne glass falling to the floor. "Open it," he said coldly, his voice echoing in the hall. I looked into his eyes, searching for some sign that this was a joke, some cruel prank. But his face was stone. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. And then my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't vows. It wasn't a love letter. It was divorce papers. Yes, divorce papers. On the very day I was supposed to marry him. The words blurred before my eyes as tears welled up. I could barely read the line that said, "Irreconcilable differences." He leaned closer so only I could hear, though I knew everyone was straining to catch his words. "You have two options," he whispered. "Sign these papers and walk away quietly, or refuse, and watch me expose the truth about you in front of everyone here." My knees almost gave out. The truth? What truth? I had nothing to hide. Or so I thought. I looked at him in shock. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to whisper. His lips curled into the faintest smirk. "Because you were never enough for me." The room erupted. My mother screamed my name. My father shouted at him to stop this madness. Guests pulled out their phones, some recording, others pretending not to. The humiliation scorched me like fire. I stood there, frozen in my wedding gown, holding divorce papers on the very altar where I was supposed to say I do. But before I could even speak, he ripped the microphone from the stand and turned to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smugly, "this wedding is over. Consider this her gift." Gasps. Murmurs. Laughter from some who delighted in the scandal. My chest tightened as I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a public execution. He wanted to break me completely, body and soul, in front of everyone who mattered to me. And he succeeded. I dropped the papers. My tears blurred the chandeliers into streaks of light. My veil slipped off my head and pooled at my feet like a discarded piece of me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to disappear. But instead, I walked away. Each step in that gown felt like dragging chains. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing louder than the whispers behind me. My heart pounded in my ears as I pushed open the heavy doors of the hall. The sunlight outside felt cruel, blinding. I stumbled down the steps, each breath sharp, each tear burning. My father called after me, and my mother tried to follow, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them see me shatter. By the time I reached the car, my entire body was trembling. I gripped the door handle, and caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't see a bride anymore. I saw a fool, a broken woman, a pawn in someone's cruel game. And in that moment, something inside me died. But something else was born. I didn't know it then. I couldn't feel it through the pain. But that day, the day I was humiliated, betrayed, and discarded, would become the day my revenge began. I didn't sleep that night. The wedding hall, the whispers, the cameras flashing, they replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. My phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls, messages, and gossip. Are you okay? What happened? Did you see what he posted? Yes, he posted. By morning, my humiliation was everywhere. My face in a white gown, my tears, my trembling hands clutching those divorce papers. He had leaked a video of it all. Edited, cropped, twisted to make me look desperate, clingy, pathetic. The captions read, "Dodged a bullet. She's not the woman you think she is." And beneath it, thousands of comments. Strangers are tearing me apart. Friends unfollowing. Even people I thought were close joining in the laughter. But what haunted me wasn't the public ridicule. It was his words at the altar. "Sign these papers, or I'll expose the truth about you." The truth? What truth? I had nothing to hide. Or so I thought. 3 days later I found out. My best friend Layla called me in a hushed voice. "You need to come over." Now, when I arrived, she shut the curtains, locked the door, and opened her laptop. She didn't even look me in the eye. "Promise me you'll stay calm." On the screen was a folder. She clicked it open. Dozens of files. Photos. Videos. Documents. All doctored. It was me, but not me. Me in places I'd never been. Me signing papers I'd never seen. Me with men I didn't know. He had forged everything. Created a false version of me. And in those files, I was painted as a liar, a cheat, a thief. Layla whispered, "He planned this. Months in advance. He was never going to marry you. He just wanted to destroy you." My hands shook as I scrolled through the lies. My stomach churned. He had prepared every piece of evidence to ruin me. Legally, socially, emotionally. But the question burned in my chest. Why? Why go through the charade of a wedding, only to rip it apart? Why invest so much time in destroying me? Layla hesitated before speaking. "There's something else. I didn't know how to tell you before." Her eyes filled with guilt as she handed me a printed email chain. It was a deal. A business merger. His family company, and my father's. Suddenly it all clicked. He never loved me. He never wanted me. I was a pawn. A bargaining chip. A contract in a wedding gown. And when the deal soured between our families, when my father refused to give up his majority shares, my so-called fiancé decided to punish me for it. Not just punish me. Destroy me. The realization burned like acid. He wanted to make sure that not only would his family's company win, but that I would never recover, never find love, never reclaim my dignity. And worst of all, my parents knew. When I confronted my father that evening, he looked away. "I tried to stop it," he muttered. "But business is business. You wouldn't understand." My mother wept, begging me to drop it, to let it go, to rebuild quietly. Rebuild quietly? After being used, discarded, humiliated, destroyed? No. Something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, raw, bleeding, unbearable. But underneath it, something sharper emerged. Something stronger. I wiped my tears in front of them and said words I never thought I'd hear my own voice say. "If he wants war, then war is what he'll get." That night, I sat in the dark, staring at those forged files on my laptop. Every photo, every lie, every twisted version of me. And instead of crying, I smiled. Because if he thought he had buried me, he had forgotten one thing. Buried things don't always stay dead. Sometimes they rise. And when they do, they rise sharper than before. I didn't know exactly how yet. But I knew this. I would not be his victim. I would be his revenge. The morning after I vowed war, I woke with swollen eyes and a pounding head. But for the first time since the humiliation, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a predator. I sat at my desk, staring at the forged files again. Every click, every photo, every fake signature. It wasn't just evidence of betrayal. It was a map. A trail of the work he had done to destroy me. And if there's one thing I know about arrogant men like him, they always leave cracks. So I decided. I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't lash out. I wouldn't scream in public or beg people to believe me. No. I would stay silent. I would watch. I would wait. And when the moment was right, I'd strike. But I couldn't do it alone. That's when I made my first call. Layla opened her door in surprise when she saw me standing there, hair tied back, a notebook in my hand. "You look different," she whispered. "I am," I replied. "But I need your help." We sat across from each other at her kitchen table. I laid out the plan as it was forming in my head. Step 1. Gather every piece of evidence that could expose his lies. Not just the files he created, but proof of his hand in making them. Metadata. Trace his digital fingerprints. Step 2. Rebuild my reputation in silence. Not through social media. He owned that battlefield now. But through networks he couldn't see. Discreetly. Quietly. Step 3. Uncover his weakness. Every man like him had one. A secret deal, a hidden betrayal, a flaw that could unravel his empire. Layla listened, her eyes widening. "You sound ruthless." "I have to be," I whispered. "He tried to bury me alive. I'm not coming back as the same woman. I'm coming back as something he won't recognize until it's too late." The first victory came sooner than I expected. Layla's cousin, a digital forensics expert, agreed to examine the files. He worked quietly late at night so that no trace would lead back to us. And within a week he found it a mistake. In one of the forged contracts, the timestamp metadata didn't match. It had been altered. Sloppily. And guess whose computer left the editing fingerprint? His. The man who thought he was untouchable had left a breadcrumb with his own name on it. I stared at the report, my hands trembling. Not with fear. With power. This was proof. The first crack in his perfect facade. But I didn't release it. Not yet. Power is wasted when spent too soon. Meanwhile, I started repairing my world. But not the way everyone expected. I didn't post sad apologies online. I didn't try to argue with the mob that called me names. I let them believe what they wanted. Instead, I reached out to people quietly. A professor who once mentored me. A colleague from my short internship. A charity I had supported. I began rebuilding my credibility where it truly mattered. In private networks, in whispers, in closed circles. Because when the storm passed, and the truth surfaced, I wanted the right people waiting to stand with me. But the more I dug into his world, the more I realized this wasn't just personal. He had enemies. Many. Business partners he had cheated. Investors he had lied to. Employees he had humiliated. Women he had manipulated. Every stone I turned revealed another snake he had stepped on. And snakes, when cornered, don't forget. One night, I found myself staring at a name scribbled in Layla's notes. Damian Cole. A rival businessman. The one man my ex had publicly insulted, humiliated, and forced out of a deal. Damian had vanished after that. People whispered he was ruined. But I wondered, was he really gone? Or just waiting like me? And if I could find him, could we join forces? The thought terrified me and thrilled me. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about bringing down the man who tried to erase me. And maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be the only one with revenge in her heart. By the end of the month, my life looked the same on the surface. I went to work. I smiled politely when people stared. I pretended to be broken. But beneath it, I was building something. Files. Contact. Secrets. Each night, when I locked my door, I whispered to myself, "Patience. Let him think he won. The day will come." And deep down I knew, when it came, it wouldn't just be my redemption. It would be his ruin. The name Damian Cole echoed in my mind for days. He was a ghost in my ex-husband's empire, the one name no one spoke aloud anymore. Once, Damian had been a rising star in the same industry. Charismatic. Bold. Brilliant. Until the man I married shattered him. My ex spread lies about him, sabotaged contracts, and left Damian bankrupt in a year. Then, like a shadow, Damian disappeared. Some people said he fled overseas. Others whispered he drank himself into oblivion. But something inside me told me the truth. Men like Damien don't vanish. They wait. And if anyone understood the taste of betrayal as I did, it was him. Finding him wasn't easy. He had no online presence, no public records, nothing. But betrayal sharpens instincts. Layla and I followed the trail through whispers. An old banker who once handled Damien's accounts mentioned a cabin by the lake. A former assistant said he sometimes appeared in dingy bars late at night, silent and brooding. Finally, one cold Friday evening, we found him. The bar smelled of stale beer and smoke. The kind of place where broken men went to forget themselves. And there he was. Damien Cole. His once perfect suit was replaced with a worn leather jacket. His hair longer, his face hardened. He sat in the corner with a half-empty glass, his eyes shadowed but sharp, a predator hiding in plain sight. I froze. This was the man I had come to for help? He looked nothing like an ally. He looked like a warning. But I forced myself forward. My heels clicked against the floor, each step heavy with nerves. Damien Cole? I asked, my voice steady though my hands trembled. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. Depends who's asking. I slid into the seat across from him. I'm the woman your enemy tried to erase. That got his attention. His gaze sharpened, scanning me like he was measuring my worth. And why, he asked, voice low and rough. Would I care about that? Because I'm not here to cry about it, I said firmly. I'm here to destroy him. And I think you want the same. For a long, tense moment he said nothing. He just stared at me, like he was peeling back my soul to see if I was bluffing. Then he smirked. A bitter, broken kind of smile. You've got guts. I'll give you that. That night, I told him everything. The forged divorce papers. The fake files. The public humiliation. My plan to gather proof, to rebuild my name, to strike when he least expected it. Damien listened in silence, sipping his drink, eyes never leaving me. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You think you're the first? He's ruined dozens. He thrives on it. People like you, they don't get back up. I felt a sting, but I leaned closer. Then let me be the first. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not pity, not disbelief, but recognition. He knew that fire. He had carried it once. Finally, he sighed. If you're serious, you need more than evidence. He'll bury you in lawyers, bribes, and public opinion. You need power. Money. Leverage. I swallowed hard. And you can give me that. He stared into his glass. I can give you something better. Knowledge. I know how he thinks. I know his weaknesses. I know where the bodies are buried. Then he leaned forward, voice a whisper. But if we do this, there's no turning back. That was the moment I realized. My revenge was no longer just mine. It was ours. Over the next weeks, Damien and I met in secret. Sometimes in that dim bar, sometimes in his cabin by the lake. He shared stories, deals my ex had rigged, companies he had sabotaged, enemies he had silenced. Piece by piece, he mapped out the empire built on lies. And for every secret he revealed, I gave him something in return. The evidence Layla and I had gathered, the metadata linking my ex to forged documents, the small victories I had won in silence. We became unlikely partners, bound not by trust, but by a shared hunger for justice. Or perhaps something darker. But Damien was right. Evidence alone wasn't enough. My ex had built an image so pristine, so untouchable, that even truth looked like a lie when it came from his victims. We needed something bigger. Something that would shake the very foundation of his empire. And Damien knew exactly where to start. There's a deal he's been working on, Damien said one night, spreading papers across the cabin table. It's massive. International investors. Billions at stake. But it's built on fraud. One wrong leak, and it all collapses. My heart raced. You mean we could end his entire empire with one strike? He nodded slowly. But it has to be done carefully. One mistake, and he'll know it's us. He'll crush you before you ever get to him. I clenched my fists. Then we won't make mistakes. But as I stared at Damien across that flickering lamplit table, another thought whispered in the back of my mind. Could I trust him? He hated my ex. That much was clear. But hate makes people dangerous. What if, in the end, Damien wanted revenge only for himself? What if I were just another pawn in a bigger game? I pushed the thought aside, but it lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. For now, though, we were allies. Unlikely. Unstable. But allies nonetheless. And together, we were about to set fire to the empire of the man who thought he owned us both. Damien's cabin had become our war room. Maps, contracts, and printouts covered the wooden table. Red ink circled key dates. Arrows connected companies, investors, and shell corporations. What looked like chaos was a carefully drawn blueprint. The architecture of my ex-husband's empire of lies. And right at the center of it sat the upcoming deal. Billions on the line. Dozens of foreign investors are flying in. My ex had built it on fake valuations and falsified documents. On the surface, it looked flawless. But Damien knew the cracks. And together, we would make sure those cracks turned into an earthquake. This is our chance, Damien said, tapping a file with his finger. If this deal collapses, it won't just hurt him. It'll expose him. Investors will turn on him. Regulators will circle. He won't be able to bury it. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. So how do we make it collapse? He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of documents, contracts, financial statements, offshore transfers. My ex's fingerprints were all over them. But that wasn't enough. Proof alone won't destroy him, Damien warned. He'll scream forgery, and people will believe him. We need more than evidence. We need spectacle. We need the world watching when the truth hits. That's where I came in. For weeks, Layla and I had been building quiet connections. A financial journalist desperate for her big break. A compliance officer in one of the investment banks who hated being silenced. Even a hacker who owed Layla a favor. Piece by piece, we stitched together an invisible army. People who didn't even know they were working for me, but whose actions would align perfectly when the time came. Our plan was bold, risky. If it failed, I'd be ruined for good. But if it worked, he wouldn't just lose his deal. He'd lose everything. The night before the investor meeting, Damien and I sat in silence at the cabin. The air was thick with tension. Outside, the lake rippled under the moonlight, calm and indifferent to the storm we were about to unleash. You know there's no going back after this, Damien said quietly, staring into his glass. I looked him straight in the eye. There was no going back the moment he stole my life. For the first time he smiled. Not bitter, not broken, but sharp. Like he saw in me the ally he had been waiting for. We strike tomorrow, he said. The day arrived. The hotel ballroom downtown buzzed with power. Investors in tailored suits, interpreters whispering in foreign tongues, assistants rushing with tablets and phones. My ex stood at the front, immaculate in his navy suit, confidence radiating off him like perfume. He shook hands, laughed at jokes, and charmed everyone within reach. If anyone had walked in without knowing better, they'd have thought he was untouchable. But I knew better. Hidden in the crowd, dressed as nothing more than a guest assistant, I moved silently, watching. My heart raced every time his eyes swept the room. Terrified he might spot me. Damien wasn't there. He worked from the shadows, pulling strings from afar. Layla texted. Journalist is ready. The compliance officer has the file. Hackers in place. Waiting on your signal. I breathed deeply. This was it. The first domino. At exactly 10:15 a.m., as my ex began his pitch, our plan clicked into motion. The journalist received a sudden email drop. The fraudulent contracts, bank transfers, and offshore leaks. Within minutes, her fingers flew across the keyboard, the headline forming like a blade. Empire built on lies? Billion-dollar deal faces fraud allegations. At 10:23 a.m., the compliance officer filed an anonymous red flag report with regulators, attaching the same evidence. A red mark against the deal. And at 10:30 a.m., the hacker struck, leaking just enough documents onto a public forum to create noise, but not enough to point back to us. By 10:35 a.m., the whispers began in the ballroom. Investors checking their phones, frowns spreading across faces, whispers growing louder. My ex noticed. His smile faltered for the first time. I almost laughed. The trap was closing. But then, something happened we hadn't planned. At 10:42 a.m., as my ex desperately tried to regain control, my phone buzzed with a message. Not from Layla. Not from Damien. From an unknown number. Leave the hotel. Now. My blood turned to ice. I looked around, scanning the crowd. Everyone looked ordinary, too ordinary. But the hairs on the back of my neck rose. Someone was watching me. I texted Damien. Did you send this? His reply came almost instantly. No. Get out. But it was already too late. As my ex's voice rose over the crowd, trying to dismiss the chaos, two men in dark suits moved toward the back of the room. Their eyes weren't on him. They were on me. I froze. My disguise suddenly felt paper thin. My heart pounded as the men pushed through the crowd, closer and closer. Had my ex discovered me? Had Damien betrayed me? Or was this someone else entirely? I clutched my phone, ready to run, when another text appeared. Trust me. Go to the kitchen. Back door. Hurry. I had seconds to decide. If I stayed, I'd be caught. If I ran, I'd be walking into a stranger's hands. Either way, the game had changed. The trap was no longer just his. Someone else had set one for me. The kitchen doors swung shut behind me, and the ballroom's noise faded into the clatter of pans and the hiss of boiling pots. For a moment, I leaned against the cool steel counter, closing my eyes and taking a breath. My heart was still hammering from the confrontation with Michael's lawyer, but I forced myself to stay calm. I thought I was in control. I thought every move had been calculated. But that night, I learned that when you step into the world of revenge, shadows have a way of following you. The sous chef glanced at me nervously, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. You okay, ma'am? He asked. I gave him a quick nod. Fine. Just a little overwhelmed. But the truth? My skin prickled with unease. Something wasn't right. I grabbed my clutch from the counter and slipped into the staff corridor, moving toward the quiet exit by the service entrance. I didn't want to go back through the ballroom, not yet. My nerves needed time to settle. The hallway was dim, lit only by weak yellow bulbs that flickered against the old plaster walls. My heels clicked softly on the floor, echoing louder than I liked. Then I froze. A shadow shifted at the far end of the corridor. At first, I told myself it was just a waiter. But then the figure stilled, too still. Watching. I felt my throat tighten. My instincts screamed that this wasn't random. I turned, trying to act casual. But my body betrayed me. My palms were slick with sweat, my heartbeat pulsing in my ears. I fumbled with my phone, pretending to check a message, and caught a reflection in the dark window beside me. The figure was moving closer. Who's there? I called out, forcing my voice not to shake. No answer. Just steady footsteps. I ducked into a side room. A storage closet stacked with linens and cleaning supplies. I shut the door gently and leaned against it, my breathing ragged. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the faint scrape of shoes outside the door. Whoever it was, they were right there. Waiting. My chest heaved. Fear wrapped itself around me like a vice, but alongside it burned something else. Anger. Michael. It had to be connected to him. He had underestimated me before, but maybe now, he was afraid. Afraid enough to send someone to silence me. The doorknob rattled. I clutched a metal hanger from the shelf, gripping it like a weapon. My mind raced. If he came in, I'd fight. But just as suddenly, the footsteps retreated. The shadow moved away, swallowed by the corridor. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The silence gnawed at me. Finally, I cracked the door open and peeked into the hallway. Empty. Or so I thought. When I stepped out, I spotted something wedged into the frame of the door across from me. A folded note. Hands trembling, I pulled it free. The handwriting was messy, almost rushed. You think you're playing him. But he's 2 steps ahead. Leave now. Or next time, you won't walk away. My stomach dropped. This wasn't paranoia. This was a warning. I hurried back toward the main hall, forcing myself to blend in with the crowd. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. The contrast was dizzying. No one here knew that in the back corridors, someone had been stalking me. But as I slipped into the crowd, my eyes immediately locked on Michael across the room. He was laughing with investors, his arms slung casually over his new wife's chair. But his eyes, they weren't relaxed. Every few seconds, they darted toward the exits. Toward me. He knew. I forced myself to smile, to act as if I hadn't just read a threat that sent ice through my veins. But inside, something shifted. Fear was no longer my enemy. It was my weapon. If he wanted me scared, he was going to see what a terrified woman could do when cornered. I raised my glass to him from across the room. His smile faltered for just a second. A crack in the armor. And in that moment, I realized, he wasn't just trying to destroy me. He was running from something too. Something bigger. And I was going to find it. That night, lying in my apartment with the note on the table beside me, I replayed every second of the encounter. Michael wasn't reckless. He was calculated. If he had sent someone, it was because I was closer to unraveling his lies than I thought. And that made me dangerous. The shadow had meant to scare me off. But instead, it gave me clarity. The game wasn't about money, or humiliation, or even revenge anymore. It was about survival. And now, I wasn't just fighting for payback. I was fighting to end his control once and for all. I folded the note, and slipped it into my journal. My hands were steady now. My heartbeat is calm. The fear was gone. All that was left was resolve. Michael thought I was a pawn in his game. But he had no idea the queen was already moving. And soon, checkmate would be mine. The note lay on my nightstand, its words burned into my mind. Leave now. Or next time, you won't walk away. A threat. A warning. Or maybe both. I stared at it for hours, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. My apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. Every creak in the walls, every car passing on the street below, sounded like danger closing in. But instead of paralyzing me, the fear did something else. It sharpened me. Michael thought he could scare me into submission, force me to crumble under pressure. But I had survived too much already. His betrayal, public humiliation, and the heartbreak of a life I'd built being torn from under me. I wasn't going to break. I was going to strike. The next morning, I put on the calmest smile I could muster and walked into the office as if nothing had happened. Every step echoed confidence I didn't fully feel, but I knew the importance of appearances. In Michael's world, weakness was blood in the water, and sharks circled fast. When I entered the boardroom, conversations hushed. I caught the flicker of surprise in the eyes of the executives. They expected me to vanish after the wedding fiasco, to hide, to be destroyed. Instead, I wore a steel gray suit, my hair neatly tied back, and a folder tucked under my arm. I moved like I belonged, because I did. Good morning, I said evenly, dropping the folder onto the long, polished table. The room waited. Michael wasn't there yet, but his presence lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. Inside the folder was my ace, documents, financial records, proof of quiet embezzlements that Michael thought no one knew about. Months ago, I wouldn't have noticed the discrepancies. But betrayal sharpens the mind. I had pored over every line, every number, until patterns began to emerge. Money moved to shell accounts, fake invoices, silent partnerships. Michael was bleeding the company dry, and he thought no one would see it. I tapped the folder lightly. When Michael arrives, this will stay closed, if he plays fair. If not, I let the sentence dangle like bait. The executives shifted uneasily. They were torn loyal to Michael, but loyal to their own pockets too. Michael walked in 5 minutes later, his new wife perched on his arm like a prize. His eyes scanned the room, then locked on me. For a second, the confident mask slipped. He hadn't expected me here. Well, he said smoothly, slipping into a seat. Looks like the ghost of last night decided to haunt us. The room chuckled politely, but his eyes never left mine. Sit down, I told him coolly. We have things to discuss. I opened the folder just enough for him to see the first page. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Then something sharper, panic. I smiled faintly. You've been very busy, Michael. Very sloppy too. The executives leaned forward, curious now. Michael's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, I whispered. And so will everyone else if you don't give me what I want. The silence in the room was deafening. And then I saw it, a flicker of calculation in his expression. Not fear. Not yet. He leaned back, smirking. You think you're clever, but you're walking into a trap you don't even see. His words made the hairs on my arms rise. He wasn't bluffing. That night, as I left the building, paranoia clawed at me again. The streets felt wrong. Too quiet. I hurried through the city lights, clutching my bag tight. Halfway to my car, I saw it. A man standing by the corner, head lowered, hands in his pockets. The same presence from the corridor at the wedding. He wasn't watching casually. He was waiting. I froze. My pulse thundered. Then I remembered Michael's smirk, his words in the boardroom. A trap you don't even see. It hit me. He wasn't just trying to ruin me financially. He was trying to break me physically, psychologically, to erase me. And yet, instead of running, I raised my chin, unlocked my car, and slid inside. I could feel the man's eyes on me, burning through the glass. But as I pulled away, I smiled. Because now I knew two things. 1. Michael was desperate enough to use intimidation. 2. Desperation makes people sloppy. And that was my opening. That night, I drafted my real plan. Not just to survive him. Not just to fight back. But to end this game once and for all. Michael thought I was walking into his trap. But he had no idea. He was already in mine. Sleep became a stranger to me. Even when I closed my eyes, I could still feel that shadow lingering on the street corner, watching me. The threat wasn't gone. It had only moved closer. But instead of letting fear consume me, I started using it. Fear was fuel. Michael thought his intimidation would weaken me. But the more he pressed, the sharper I became. I was no longer the woman humiliated at the altar, holding divorce papers with shaking hands. I was becoming someone else. Someone he had never met before. By day, I played my part. Calm, measured, untouchable. I went to the office, smiled at the executives, and worked quietly at my desk. Michael strutted around, pretending he still owned the room, but I noticed the cracks. The smirk didn't reach his eyes anymore. His new wife clung to him tighter than before, like she could sense his slipping control. And when our gazes met across the boardroom table, he looked away first. That small victory, invisible to others, was everything to me. By night, I built my arsenal. I copied every document, every bank record, every shell company trail into a secured drive. I met quietly with 2 board members who I knew despised Michael's arrogance. At first, they were hesitant. But when I showed them the files, their faces drained of color. "He's robbing us blind," one of them whispered. I leaned forward. "And I can prove it. But I need your help." They didn't answer immediately. But I saw the shift in their eyes. Seeds of betrayal had been planted. The same seeds Michael once used against me. Only this time they would grow against him. But Michael wasn't staying idle. 2 nights later, I found another note slipped under my door. No handwriting, just bold block letters. "This won't end well for you. Walk away." I laughed bitterly. For years, I had been the one silenced, manipulated, and forced into the shadows while Michael made decisions for both of us. Now he was the one trying to silence me, because he finally felt my power pressing back. I pinned the note to my wall like a trophy. The turning point came at a corporate charity gala, a glittering event where Michael loved to flaunt his wealth and influence. That night, I dressed in black satin, sleek and sharp, my hair falling in waves over my shoulders. When I walked in, conversations faltered. Some looked at me with pity, others with surprise. Michael, standing near the stage with a glass of champagne, froze when he saw me. His wife's smile faltered too. Good. I wanted him off balance. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I drifted through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing softly, slipping pieces of information like daggers hidden in silk. I whispered to board members about financial irregularities and unexplained transfers, planting just enough to make them curious. The whispers spread fast, faster than champagne. By the time Michael took the stage for his speech, I could see the nervous twitch in his jaw. He held the microphone tightly, his usual smooth confidence slightly cracked. I smiled from the back of the room. The war had shifted. But then, something happened that almost broke my composure. As Michael spoke, my phone buzzed in my clutch. A single text from an unknown number. "Smile while you can. Tonight's your last night." My stomach lurched. My eyes scanned the crowd. The same shadowy man I'd seen before wasn't there, but that didn't matter. The threat was real. Michael's voice droned on from the stage, but I no longer heard the words. My mind raced. If they were planning to strike tonight, then I had one chance. One chance to flip the trap completely. I slipped out of the ballroom quietly, walking through the hotel's silent hallways until I found what I needed. The security office. A surprised guard looked up as I entered, but all it took was a flash of my ID badge and a few sharp words, and he let me in. Row after row of camera screens lit the room. Guests sipping champagne. Waiters carrying trays. Valets rushing outside. And then there, near the edge of the ballroom, half hidden in the shadows, was the man. Hands in his pockets. Watching. Waiting. I snapped a picture with my phone. Proof. And suddenly, the fear inside me solidified into resolve. Michael wasn't just trying to ruin me. He wanted me gone permanently. But what he didn't realize was that I had already gathered enough evidence to ruin him before he even made his move. When I walked back into the ballroom, my head was high, my smile cold. Michael's eyes flicked to me mid-sentence, and for the first time in years, I saw something I had longed to see. Fear. That night, as I drove home, the threats no longer felt suffocating. They felt like proof I was winning. And I whispered into the darkness of my car, Michael, your game is almost over. The next move is mine. The night after the gala, I couldn't shake the image of that man standing in the shadows. His presence haunted me, not because of his face. I barely caught it on the security footage, but because of what it meant. Michael had moved beyond humiliation, beyond intimidation. He was preparing for elimination. And if I wasn't careful, I'd be the one buried. I tightened the locks on my doors. I installed cameras inside and out. Every time a car slowed near my house, my chest tightened. Every unfamiliar sound in the night had me reaching for my phone. But I didn't crumble. No, I planned. If Michael thought he could scare me into silence, he had underestimated me yet again. Because with every threat, every shadow, each whispered warning, he was only giving me more reason to finish what I had started. 3 days later, the attack came. I had just pulled into the underground parking garage beneath my apartment building. The lights flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the rows of parked cars. I grabbed my bag, stepped out, and the echo of my heels clicked sharply against the concrete. That's when I heard it, the soft scrape of shoes behind me. My pulse spiked. I turned quickly. The man from the footage was there. Hood drawn low, shoulders tense. In his hand gleamed something metallic, a knife. Walk away, he hissed. His voice was deep, flat, chillingly calm. Drop it all, or you won't live to regret it. For a split second, terror rooted me in place. But then clarity surged through me. I wasn't the woman who shook in a wedding gown anymore. I wasn't the woman who cried in silence. I had prepared for this. Slowly, I reached into my bag. His knife raised higher. But instead of pulling out money or my phone, I pulled out something else, my pepper spray, finger already on the trigger. His eyes widened. I sprayed directly into his face. He screamed, dropping the knife, clutching his burning eyes as his knees buckled. The echo of his pain bounced off the garage walls. And then, with shaking hands but a steady voice, I called 911. The police arrived minutes later. They cuffed him while he cursed and spat, his voice breaking between groans of pain. And when I demanded to know who had sent him, his silence told me everything. Michael. Of course it was him. The officers took him away, but something inside me shifted permanently. I had survived his attempt to silence me, and now I had proof. The man had been caught in the act. With the right pressure, the right legal leverage, I could tie him directly back to Michael. And when I did, the empire Michael had stolen wouldn't just slip from his grasp. It would crumble beneath him. That night I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I sat at my desk, staring at the mountain of files, recordings, and the fresh police report. My heart was steady. My breathing is calm. For the first time since the day of my wedding, I felt completely in control. Michael had tried to destroy me in front of everyone. He had tried to erase me quietly in the dark. But what he didn't realize was that every move he made only tightened the noose around his own neck. The next morning, I called the board secretary and made a request that would change everything. I want to present at the next quarterly meeting, I said, my voice smooth, confident. There was a pause. Are you certain, Ms. Adams? Michael usually. I don't care what Michael usually does, I interrupted. This time they'll hear from me. And with that, the trap was set. The meeting would be public, recorded, witnessed by every shareholder, every board member, every person who had once pitied me. And when I walked into that room, I wouldn't just reclaim my power. I would burn Michael's world to ash. The morning of the board meeting arrived like a storm on the horizon. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from friends, from curious well-wishers, even from distant relatives who hadn't bothered to check in when I was broken. But I ignored them all. I had one focus, one goal. And today, it would all end. When I entered the towering glass building of the company, the very empire Michael had built on lies, deceit, and my suffering, the air seemed to shift. Employees paused mid-step, whispering in corners, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some probably thought I had come to beg. Others thought I had come to embarrass myself further. But I kept my chin high. My heels clicked with confidence as I strode toward the conference hall. And inside, when the massive doors swung open, silence swept the room. The board of directors sat in a neat line at the long oak table. Shareholders filled the rows of plush seats behind them. And at the head, in his immaculate navy suit, sat Michael. He smirked the moment he saw me, leaning back lazily in his chair, exuding fake control. Well, well, he drawled loud enough for the room to hear. The runaway bride finally shows her face. Laughter rippled across a few of his loyalists. But I didn't flinch. I walked straight to the podium at the front, set down my folder of documents, and adjusted the microphone. Good morning, I said, my voice steady. My name is Elena Adams. And contrary to what you've been told, I am not here to beg, nor to disappear quietly. The murmurs started instantly. Michael chuckled. You're not on the agenda. This meeting is for business, Elena. Not. This is business. I cut him off, locking eyes with him. The business of truth. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their curiosity piqued. I opened my folder slowly, deliberately. For 2 years, Michael Adams has told you all a story. About me, about our marriage, about why I left. I paused, letting the tension stretch. But the truth is far darker than any of you could imagine. Gasps echoed as I pulled the first sheet free. The legal record of the man caught in the parking garage. This, I said, raising it, is a police report. Filed last week, when I was attacked in my own building by a hired assailant. He carried a knife. He admitted he was paid to silence me. And while he refused to say the name of the man who hired him, I let my gaze lock on Michael. All evidence points to only one. Michael shot up from his chair, face red. This is absurd. A baseless accusation from a bitter ex-wife. But his voice cracked just slightly, and the room heard it. I continued, unshaken. For years, Michael embezzled company funds to cover his debts. I have records here. I held up a stack of spreadsheets, showing hidden transfers to offshore accounts. Money that should have gone into your pockets, stolen to fuel his ego and his secret life. The board leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And if you're wondering how I have this, I said smoothly, it's because the accountant he bribed to bury these numbers finally broke. I have his signed affidavit right here. I slapped the paper onto the podium. The sound cracked like thunder. Michael was pale now. Sweat glistened at his temples. Lies. All lies, he barked, though his voice trembled. But I wasn't finished. Oh, and there's one more thing, I said softly, letting my voice drop so the entire room leaned in. Do you remember the day of our wedding, Michael? When you handed me divorce papers in front of our families, our friends, our colleagues. You told me I had 2 choices. Lose my dignity, or lose everything I owned. The room stilled. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Well, I whispered, my tone razor sharp. You forgot that there's always a third option. Revenge. The screens behind me flickered alive. I had arranged it with the IT team secretly. A video began to play. It was the security footage from the gala, showing Michael cornering me, threatening me in hushed tones. Then footage of the hired attacker being arrested. Then the accountant's testimony, his face blurred but his voice steady. Yes, Michael Adams instructed me to move company funds illegally. I was paid to keep it quiet. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. The board members spoke over each other, some already pushing away from Michael, as though he were contagious. And Michael collapsed back into his chair, his mask finally shattering. "You," he sputtered, pointing at me with a trembling hand. "You set me up." "No, Michael," I said calmly. "You set yourself up. I just showed them who you are." The chairman of the board rose to his feet, his expression thunderous. "Effective immediately, Michael Adams. You are suspended pending full investigation. Security, escort him out." 2 guards moved forward. Michael's face twisted into something almost animalistic, fear mixed with rage. "This isn't over," he screamed as they dragged him from his chair. "You'll regret this, Elena. You'll regret." The doors slammed behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. I closed my folder, lifted my chin, and looked around the room. "For years," I said, my voice carrying with unshakable strength, "I was silenced, humiliated, and discarded. Today, I take back not just my dignity, but everything that was stolen from me. And I promise you, under my leadership, this company will never again be a man's playground for greed." The board broke into applause. Some stood. The shareholders cheered. Cameras flashed. And me? I stood at that podium, steady and unbroken, feeling the weight of my revenge finally lift. Because I hadn't just destroyed Michael's empire. I had reclaimed my own. It's strange, isn't it? How quickly the world can turn. 2 years ago, I was standing at an altar, humiliated, stripped of everything I thought I had. My husband, in only minutes, had handed me divorce papers, smirking as he shredded my dignity in front of the world. And now, Michael sits in a cell. The headlines tell his story better than I ever could. Disgraced CEO arrested for fraud and conspiracy. Once powerful businessman faces decades behind bars. Ex-wife's explosive evidence brings down corporate giant. The newspapers, the same ones that once printed his lies about me, now begged me for interviews. Overnight, I went from the forgotten bride to the woman who took down an empire. The trial was swift. Michael's allies abandoned him as soon as they realized the depth of his crimes. The accountant testified. The hired assailant confessed. Even some of his closest friends turned witnesses to save themselves. I sat in the courtroom every day, not out of spite, but to remind myself that I was no longer the weak, broken woman he tried to bury. And when the judge finally declared his sentence, 20 years without parole, Michael turned in his chair, his eyes searching for me. But there was nothing left to find. Not love. Not hate. Only the silence of a woman who had already moved on. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Flashes, microphones, voices shouting my name. "Elena, how does it feel to see justice served?" I smiled. Not for them, but for myself. "It feels," I said softly, "like freedom." Now months later, my life is not the same. The company I once thought I had lost forever is mine. The board, impressed with my strength and transparency, voted me in as CEO. Some said it was poetic justice. Others called it fate. But I know what it truly was: survival, sharpened into strength. The office that once belonged to Michael is now mine. I kept nothing of his. Not his furniture, not his art, not even the chair he sat in. I had it all removed, sold, and the proceeds donated to women's shelters. Because if my story means anything, it's that no woman should ever feel powerless, alone, or trapped. Sometimes, when I look out from that corner office over the city skyline, I wonder if Michael thinks of me from his prison cell. If he replays the moment security dragged him from the boardroom. If he curses the day he underestimated the woman he thought he had broken. But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter. Because his story ended in disgrace. And mine? Mine has only just begun. Final line, for voiceover impact. He threw me away like I was nothing. But in the end, I was everything he could never be. Strong, free, and finally untouchable.